throw in some comments.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting that you say you feel like Slave Driver like doesn't feel like a Converge track. I'm very confused by that because that like definitely
I
sounds
think
like in Converge. Maybe it's because you haven't listened to No Heroes and you haven't heard that progression from like uh
maybe I think it's mostly the vocals on that track is what gets me.
okay, interesting. Really? They're still I guess I'm not seeing where you're coming from with the vocals because they sound very convergy to me. Unless I'm forgetting a part of the track. They still sound super monstrous and in your face. Are you?
That's only in like the choruses,
Are you?
or maybe that's the verses. I'm getting the chorus and verses switch.
Are you confusing this with a cruel bloom?
Listen, go to like 45 seconds in Slave Driver.
Oh, that. I mean, that happens on a lot of Converge albums, though. I guess I'm just like that definitely happens on No Heroes for sure. But
I
that
haven't listened to No Heroes.
yeah, no, but that also happens on uh whatever it is. That also happens on their newer albums. So
Yeah, it usually happens on like the longer tracks on the newer albums. Yeah, it's been a while
kind
since I've
of.
listened.
I don't know. It still happens on some shorter ones. I don't know. It's just interesting because, like, I think, like, in terms of sound, that just sounds to me like a Converge track. The way the guitar work is super intense and, like, I don't know, very
Honestly, I don't find the guitars like that engaging on Slave Driver either.
really
I'm just like not a huge fan of like the instrumentation on that track,
interesting.
except for the drums. I like Converge drums. I found that out.
I do love their drummer Ben Kohler. He is really fantastic. He has this is like completely unrelated. He has you can watch videos of YouTube of him like a drum cam of him. It's like a GoPro that he just like wears during concerts. It's like just watching him drum during concerts is like awesome. It's super intense. It's interesting. I can understand why you might not like Cruel Bloom and Wretched World, like in terms of how they fit into the album. Because I don't know, Cruel Bloom is a song that almost feels like kind of country-ish in a way. Like it kind of sounds like a Western song, if that makes sense.
I guess. Somebody on Genius called it David Bowie inspired, I think.
Really?
I don't know where that was coming from.
I don't.
Genius. Anybody can say anything on Genius.
I really don't hear that. Because you have like. It's specifically like the piano, and occasionally there are like these like guitar like upticks or licks. I don't know what to call it. That like sound very like Western-ish to me. So I can understand why you might not think they fit in that well with the album. Although I think the way that it transitions into them, I think works really well. And I also feel like, in terms of their sound and production, they don't sound. I mean, they sound different than other tracks, but like they don't have. It's not jarring to me. It's not like you have just like a random acoustic track or something. It still sounds heavy. It still sounds like this super loud, like spacious reverby guitar is like you just have them all over the track, and I think that like for me makes these very digestible once you get to them. Also, you mentioned this is one of the most accessible Converge albums, which I guess I do think it's more accessible than some of their previous albums. It is not an accessible album, though. It's still insanely extreme. Like, Axe to Fall is, like, one of the most intense songs I've ever heard, and I love Axe to Fall. It's like one of my favorite songs of all time, and it's just like it's so blood pumping for me. But I think for a lot of people, if they're listening to this for like the first time, the vocals especially are going to be a turnoff because Jacob Bannon has a very unique, like, his vocals are like monstrous sounding, in a way that I don't think any other vocalist is able to capture. And I definitely think for a lot of people that is a big turnoff from their music. But I love it, and I think it works really well with their sound. So, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. You say this album is, yeah, definitely still extreme. I was actually, I don't know. I'm at the point where I've listened to enough extreme music where I was just like, this is...
It's not extreme enough.
It's not extreme. That's actually what I was like. I was like, this isn't extreme enough. Because to me, it doesn't have, like, it doesn't draw you in. It doesn't intrigue me, at least, in the same way that, like, You Fail Me or Jane Doe does, especially Jane Doe.
Okay.
Jane Doe deep dive, probably one day, maybe.
There's definitely, I guess for me, like, there's almost like a warmth to some of this album that I think previous Converge albums maybe don't have. So, like, I don't know, I do think maybe I should have recommended No Heroes instead of this album. Because I think listening to No Heroes is, like, a much more palatable introduction to this sound of Converge.
I don't dislike this album.
Yeah, I figured that. I know you said you liked it overall.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It just, I don't know. I feel like when stacked up against their other albums, I feel like it just falls short. And,
honestly, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Because I do think this is like my least favorite of their post Jane Doe work. And I don't know why. Like, I've come back to this album quite a bit, but every time, I don't know. I still think it's a great record, but there is like something lacking about it for me. I think that might partially... This has turned into a full-on discussion about this album instead of you just reviewing it, but...
It's fine. I pretty much got through most of my points. So.
I think that partially that might just be that this album... It has a kind of weird, like, back and forth flow to it almost, where you get these super intense tracks, and then you're kind of pulled back with something that's more, like... you're pulled back with something that's more, like, approachable, I guess. I don't know. Something that's more...
Yeah. Because, like, from Effigy to Worms Will Feed, Rats Will Feast is, like... Worms Will Feed is just so much less intense.
Yeah, definitely.
And also, like, I feel like Worms Will Feed is also just, like, so much more one-dimensional than Effigy.
Yeah,
I want to say.
I definitely agree with that. Although I do enjoy the Rats Will Feast part.
The Rats Will Feast outro is pretty solid, yeah.
I do like I enjoy the build of that song, but it's definitely not... I don't know. It's interesting. It's definitely not one of my favorite tracks on the record. Yeah, I don't know. I think that also happens on Damages, where you have this, like, trudging, like, beat to it that I'm just not that into. So...